Hello and welcome to the Charles River Conservancy Parkland Show. My name is Renata von Charner. I'm the founder and president of the Charles River Conservancy, and we have a wonderful guest today that I want you to meet, Mike Connolly, State Representative. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Representative Connolly, I'd like you to tell us how long you've been our state rep and what made you want to be in that office.
Sure. Well, I was sworn into office in January, so I've been state representative.
2017.
Yeah, so
Yes.
I've been in office a little over 4 months now. And I wanted to run, really to serve our community and to serve our state. And, I grew up in public housing in Norwood, Massachusetts. And so at a very young age, it was impressed upon me that the Democratic Party would serve people in need, people who, had any difficulties in life, and that public service in general is really, the lifeblood of our democracy and of our country. And so it's really been truly the honor of a lifetime to represent Cambridge and also Somerville in the state legislature. And I represent, as you know, the eastern portions of Cambridge in the eastern portions of Somerville.
Maybe let's look at your district.
There it is.
You worked with City Councillor Dennis Carlone before you ran for state office. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, I started getting involved in Cambridge, politics and advocacy probably around the year 2012, and met Dennis in 2013 and supported him, and he won city council, and then he gave me the opportunity to work as his legislative aide, and so that really gave me a chance to see how decisions are made, how policy is put into action.
Yeah.
And I know Dennis, I learned a lot from him when it comes to land use planning, when it comes to thinking about how to make this complex urban environment both livable and, in a word that Dennis uses that sometimes we don't use enough in politics, beautiful, which is something that shouldn't just be, an afterthought, but I think is, central to thinking about our public space and our city in general.
Yeah. Tell us I know you have some very important stories that happened along the Charles River. Tell us about that.
So this is a great story. I shared this with you before. My wife Casey, I actually met her when I was in law school at Boston College, and she was living in Somerville, and I was living out in Newton. So we decided to look to move to Cambridge to kind of split the difference. And then not long after we moved here, I made up my mind I was going to ask her to marry me. So I got the ring, and I had a good feeling. I thought, we had talked a little bit about it, and I had a sense it was headed in the right direction. But I hadn't made up my mind where exactly to propose to her. But there was a beautiful day. It was a December, probably 2011, and we had tickets to go see a show in Boston. And so I just thought, we'll walk in and I'll try to find the right location. And so we walked along the Charles, and so right by there's that dock, right along the East Cambridge riverfront. There's this sort of dock. I don't know if they use the dock much, but it's definitely there. And there's like a little catwalk that takes you down to the dock. So
near the Broadway Canal.
Right near the Broadway Canal, exactly. And I'm sort of a history buff and sort of an amateur, student of the river. So on many occasions, she was used to me telling her, facts about the Charles River. I grew up in Norwood, so, we have the Neponset River. I've always been fascinated by the fact that there's actually a connection between the Neponset and the Charles in Dedham called Mother Brook.
The Neponset River receives about a third of the water of the Charles.
Oh yeah. And I know way back in history, in the days of mills and stuff, there were disputes, and there was a lot of decisions that had to be made regarding, how those two rivers interacted. So she was, knowing that I had an interest in these topics and had talked about them before, she says that she had no idea that I was going to propose to her. She thought that it was going to be, you know, some kind of lecture about the Charles River and the ecology. But I led her down to this dock and then, you know, got on one knee and asked her to marry me, and she said yes. So it was good. And I actually, the location was impromptu, right? And of course the Charles is beautiful. There's people jogging, there's people running. So I hadn't intended to go down to the dock, but the problem was there were people everywhere. It was like, you know, it was like a warm December day, one of those days. So people were jogging, people were biking. And I thought, gee, you know, I'd like a little bit of privacy. And then I spotted this dock and I was like, that'll work. And even though the location was impromptu, I did have a horse and buggy planned at Faneuil Hall waiting for us, and so I figured, you know...
That same evening?
That same evening.
Oh, wow,
so,
you were really prepared.
So the idea was, we were making our way to Faneuil Hall, and somewhere along the way I had to pop the question, but then after that, you know, she cried, I cried, she called her mom, and her family, and then we made our way to Faneuil Hall and did like a horse and buggy ride around the city. I thought that would be a good way to memorialize it, and went off to a show. So
you said in new standards here. That's what
I know. Well, you know, I mean, it's and she's a really special lady. We ended up getting married about 2 years after that. So we were engaged for a couple of years. We got married in 2013, and so actually.
And you're both athletes, I also remember.
Yes, so I played football in college and was a basketball and football player. She played basketball, and also, highly relevant to the Charles, she was on the crew team at Bowdoin. And so she actually, you know, participated in the regatta, both as a student athlete, which I didn't know her at that point, so I'd never witnessed that. But also, I did get to witness, she participated in like an alumni boat at the regatta for like Bowdoin, you know, crew alumni. So I did get to finally see for the first time in my life one of these regattas, which you'd think it would be super exciting, but it actually happens pretty quick. You know, you pick your spot and it's like, oh, here she comes, and a second later she's gone.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you're just kind of there for another, you know, hour or whatever.
Yeah.
But it was amazing. I'm really glad to have that opportunity. And yeah, we're coming up on our 4-year wedding anniversary next week, actually. So it's coming up quickly.
This is wonderful because it sets the tone for the river and you liking the river, even if your district only touches the river really in North Pointe Park. I have actually an image of how North Pointe Park, you were already in Boston, but in the early 2000s, of how that area looked like.
Right.
And how much it has changed.
Oh yeah, I can remember, I did a duck tour, which, actually the duck tours are fabulous. I wasn't expecting much, but being a history buff, I couldn't believe how much the tour guide knew. But as you know, the duck tours come around there and bring people in, and so I can distinctly recall, you know, a decade ago or more, how, you know, how much more of a wasteland it was. And certainly on the topic of Dennis Carlone, we certainly owe, I think, Dennis and many others gratitude for all of the thought that has gone in over the years to, you know, helping to transform this from a complete wasteland into a place where now people can start to experience it.
I think Dennis had different plans, and I like Dennis's plans, but that's what we see on the screen here.
Right,
It's kind of what it is now.
Yes.
And one thing I particularly like is the islands and the lagoons. I think that's very interesting. And
it's truly something. And I you know, living, you know, not too far from there, right now, I go down there, you know, whenever I can, and it's just such a beautiful location. And I have to imagine as more and more people find out about it, it, you know, will eventually just become, you know, incredibly active.
Yeah, because it's still very little used because people don't know it and they don't know how to get there.
Right.
And but the play areas, the two playground and spray pools are very heavily used now by families. And this EF2, which is the building on the right, that has a restaurant on the ground floor, so that is heavily used. But let's go have a look of what happened at that site. We all know that there is now the skate park, which opened in 2015, and is 2,000 people were there.
I'll tell you what, the skate park is used a lot. I mean, because when I'm down there, and sometimes actually, speaking of my wife Casey, so she works in Faneuil Hall. So occasionally, you know, if I have free time or something, I will actually walk with her to her work, and she'll use that North Bank Bridge, and you know, we'll go over the dam locks and then make our way toward Faneuil Hall. So we walk by there sometimes in the morning, sometimes at night, and the amazing thing is that park is being used constantly.
Yeah, well,
It's very successful.
It's successful. It obviously skaters let us know that they have wanted it a little while ago, but it took a long time to do it. But we had a lot of political support on all the city and the state and the federal level, so that was great. Yeah. Yes. So things are happening in that area. Maybe we can just also now look at new developments that are happening there. Something that was before you were in the house, the site of the EF3 site. There was special legislation to build another EF building, and here is what EF is proposing to do, a dorm building there.
Right.
And I know there is a demand for dorm buildings. Obviously, as park advocates, we are concerned about selling off state land because parkland is so precious. So that is there is now the final environmental impact report is out, and Chapter 91 will be out. So this is being decided right now, what's happening. And I know you are closely connected with the East Cambridge planning team. They are also looking at that. Yes.
Yeah, I'm actually after this discussion, I'm planning to make my way down to the East Cambridge planning team. I believe this is on the agenda this evening.
Yeah.
To hear about it, and as you indicated, and I think this is, you know, it is unfortunate because this has happened. Legislation had been filed that set this project in motion prior to my entry into the state legislature, and as I understand it, you know, this legislation was not. People were not quite aware that all these things were happening, and so certainly as a new state representative, one of the things that I'm really trying to do is make sure that people are aware when legislation like this that could impact East Cambridge or North Pointe or the city in general comes forward, because I'm hearing from East Cambridge planning team right now, people have questions, what's happening, and how will it work out? How will it impact things?
I think East Cambridge is, of course, they have less green space than other parts of Cambridge. They have less swimming areas, and there are some benefits that are promised, like the use of the gym. So East Cambridge wants to make sure how can get access to that with all the students. So there's some details. And also, should there be a fund set aside by EF for waterfront activation because it's former tideland and to maintain parkland. So these are all the discussions. That
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think one of the things that, I started to get tuned into when I was working with Councillor Caroline at City Hall is the fact that all open space isn't, created equal. I mean, there's public open space, and then there's publicly accessible open space.
Private open space, yeah.
Which is, private open space. And one of the things that Councillor Dennis Carlone really impressed upon me is the value of preserving for the public public open space and even trying to capture new open space.
Yeah.
And so one of the great examples of it is that, down by the mall and,
At Leachmere Canal.
down by the mall
Yeah.
at Leachmere Canal, that is like a public park. That's the city of Cambridge. You can read the signs and, essentially you're really in the public realm. Nowadays, fast forward, up to this time, and I think we're finding more resistance on the part of developers and more willingness sometimes on the part of city officials or state officials to allow our open space to sort of be given, or traded off to the private sector, and then kind of, leased back to us as accessible, but not entirely, public. And I'm certainly concerned to say, how can we maintain, public open space?
Yeah,
I think it's very important. One, just as an aside, one area where this is also become a concern is with the Volpe development in Kendall Square, which is really one of the largest commercial real estate developments probably in the United States in terms of the potential value. You can imagine right next to, Kendall Square is a globally attractive area for commercial real estate, and this is going to be a significant parcel right not too far from the Red Line stop. And as I'm sure for many years residents of East Cambridge were told, when it's time to do Volpe, we will set aside a very large quantity, maybe 7.5 acres, something like that, as a public park, and that will be a resource that we can use to really provide relief to all the density and the development, a place for people to gather and that kind of thing. And a couple years ago, the federal government indicated that they were ready to initiate some development at this Volpe site. And one of the first things, and I was disappointed to see this happen, one of the first things that was taken off the table was that promise for that public, for that large public park. We were told right away, look, it's going to have to be cut back tremendously. And I know right now people are on the city council, thinking through that. So I think it's just another indication of this challenge.
Yeah.
I had one of the things I had done as an activist over the years was I tried to preserve the silver maple forest out in Belmont, which ended up being converted to housing, which we definitely need housing. But one of the real unfortunate parts was there was a ton of surface parking built as well, and that's also near a red line stop. And I thought to myself, gee, how are you gonna cut down trees and cut down a forest to build hundreds of parking spots? So I think all of this is just examples of where planning and the planning, you got to have the plan, but then B, also the revenue to execute things.
Yeah.
Both of those pieces are so important, and they're both things that as someone who was recently sworn into office, they're things that I'm trying to advance, both strong planning and strong revenue.
Yeah, and we have seen in the Seaport District where a lot of buildings, a lot of new residences, and then what used to be the BRA, the Boston Planning and Development Agency, realized, we don't have enough open space. People want open space. If they pay these high fees for housing, luxury housing, they expect open space. There is not enough. So I think the Volpe Center and North Pointe Park are good examples that open space is so crucial, not just for the new residents, but also for people in East Cambridge who have very little open space.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we have looked at the North Pointe Park also as a swim park, which in a way would be a new open space.
Absolutely.
And we did a feasibility study to create that, and we're having now charrettes and outreach so that people can comment of how that would look like.
Wow.
And that's
beautiful.
how it would look like. So that's what we're working on. But you had also mentioned that when you met with your wife at the skate park, the connections there is this wonderful connection now, the North Bank Bridge, which is a gift from the federal government of $32 million because it was shovel ready
Right.
from the Recovery Act.
Wow.
So
It's
that
such
was
a beautiful
amazing.
bridge, yeah.
An amazing gift.
I mean, in terms of a footbridge, there's nothing like it I've ever seen, honestly. I mean, I
No.
spend most of my time, in the Cambridge, Somerville area. Never seen anything like it.
No.
It's so beautiful, and it's very modern. It's attractive. The way it's lit up is really spectacular.
Yeah. And the same designers are designing the South Bank Bridge. It's now at 25%, and it will be just as challenging to go over the railroad underneath the bridge. So it will be technically just as challenging. I mean, that's why the form of the North Bank Bridge is so interesting, because it had to go over the railroad underneath the second bridge. So
Right.
will be, and then the Bascule Bridge, which is the one that crosses the river, that also has funding allocated for it, but it is dependent on the timetable of Mass DOT to replace the Bascule, the weight that opens up
Right.
the railroad. So that's coming, but that will take a little bit longer.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
mean, one comment I'd make on all that is, and it really goes to some of the advocacy that I've been doing in my first months here at the State House, is we have a serious need for revenue in our state budget. Many people are shocked when they learn, and this is a fact, our state budget today is $3.5 billion less than it was 17 years ago after you adjust for inflation. And that's not a new circumstance. Over these past 17, 20 years, we have seen tens of billions of dollars of underinvestment. And the reason why is, about 2 decades ago, our state implemented across the board tax cuts on income tax, cuts on dividends and interest, cuts on business tax. And at the time, you can remember the late 90s, the economy was really booming. I think legislators back then thought, oh, we can afford to lower these taxes and we can still fund everything we need. But as I'm sure you're well aware, entities like Department of Conservation and Recreation have seen, real cuts and real constraints to their budgets. And so I'm really proud to say that, we recently had a House budget. I actually co-sponsored an initiative that wouldn't have raised taxes, but our income tax actually goes down periodically based on some, arrangements that were done back then. So I joined with Representative Denise Provo in Somerville, and we proposed not even to raise taxes, but let's just freeze them where they are. Let's not step them down. And I joined with about 4 other colleagues to stand in support of that and speak on it on the floor of the House. But unfortunately, we weren't able to muster enough support. And that's tough.
Yeah. Well, I want to make sure that people, just if you want to, North Pointe, I don't think we have much time for that, because we are about running out of time, but I want to make sure people know how to get hold of you. And I want to thank you for coming on the show today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me. This is a wonderful program.
And
thank you for all the work you do.
Well, we are park advocates, and that's what we do to make the parklands more active, attractive, and accessible. So we welcome you to the Charles River, and I hope we continue to work together.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. It's been my pleasure, and it's just my honor to be able to serve this, this wonderful community.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And here is how you can reach the Conservancy and learn more about our volunteer program, about swimming, about underpasses, and what we work about. So thank you very much.